seated. And remember to silence your cell phones if you have them. We do have Supervisor Mark Nelson on the phone. Can you still hear us, Mr. Nelson?
Yes, can hear you loud and clear.
We can definitely hear you. It's turned way up in here, so. All right, thank you. First item is approval of the agenda. If there's no corrections, I'll move it.
Second.
Second by Taylor. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay.
Aye.
Passes 5-0. Items 2 through 5 constitute a consent agenda of routine action items to be considered by one motion. Items pass unanimously unless a separate vote is requested by a board member. Item 2 is approval of the minutes of the July 11th meeting. Item 3 is approval of the claims. Item 4 from Human Resources includes A, approval of the memorandum of personnel transactions, and B, authorization to initiate the hiring process. Item 5 from Juvenile Detention, Director Ryan Weber is approval of the contract amendment with Nebraska Probation. Any questions on the consent agenda? I'll second the motion by Radig. Hearing no further discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Item 6 from the Board of Supervisors, Mr. Taylor and Nelson. This comes back on the agenda, this time for action. This is approval of resolution and energy policy and growth for Woodbury County. I'll open it up to Mr. Taylor and Mr. Nelson to introduce, and the rest of the board at that time can comment. Then we can open it up to public input and go from there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So this is the second week, and we have a full board, albeit with Supervisor Nelson from afar. And what we'd like to do is read the introduction and then the resolution itself. Woodbury County has a renewed interest in seeing our county grow for the benefit of families, residents, and future generations. In short, we want to grow the right way as stewards of the land entrusted to us from our forebears and leave our county an even better place to work, live, and raise a family for future generations. During the past 5 years, the county has been confronted by several energy ideas that often seem short-sighted, trading short-term gain for the long-term pain that could degrade the land, safety, property rights, quality of life, and true economic growth. Therefore, Woodbury County supports economical and dependable forms of energy that have helped historically build America, such as coal and natural gas, and are just technologies that improve environmental stewardship and are not dependent on weather, which has proven to cause shortages when needed most. Secondly, recognizing the long-term stability and sustainability of coal-fired electricity and the jobs necessary to support it at Port Neal. We have heard from those constituents, we've heard from their families and their livelihoods that depend upon it. Cost-effective energy, rather than those that purport to be cost-effective, but instead are heavily subsidized with reliance on federal and state government programs, which in reality are taxpayer dollars that pick winners and losers. A mindfulness for landowners and families who reside on the land over and above the interests of out-of-state companies and absentee landlords whose projects may negatively affect the quality of life and future economic prosperity. An absolute right for private property land rights with a rejection of the use of eminent domain. We have heard no one, and I mean no one, speak for the use of eminent domain to force landowners to place pipelines, turbines, solar panels, or any other energy commodity on their land against their will and consent. A commitment to land use that doesn't take productive ground out of agricultural production at a time when young farmers and true economic development needs a place to grow. Free market capitalism, market-driven technologies from a taxation standpoint that do not rely on abatements, incentives, credits, and other advantages over and above other industries. The safety of citizens and families, not subjecting residents to harm. Technologies that truly steward the environment, but not from supposed green energy that comes from China, is not biodegradable, is not founded on research and science, and doesn't meet a common sense threshold. Energy industries that steward the land and do not degrade the soil in such a way as to impact erosion, compaction, water quality, and wildlife ecosystems, and preserve our most valuable natural resource, the land, for future generations. That is the resolution as read the second time. And I just want to make a couple of points, and then I'll kick it over to Supervisor Nelson. This is about environmental stewardship done the right way, that is balanced, all told, and also is a response to our citizens that we have heard time and time again. We have heard overwhelmingly that this is a kind of resolution that can help to set not only energy policy, but also inform the Board of Adjustment, our planning and zoning, as well as other economic development in the future. There is nothing that is anti-clean about it. In fact, technologies such as geothermal and others, Sioux City, in fact, is a top 10 city in the nation for Energy Star buildings. I know because I worked closely with conservation and helping to achieve that. But it is something that we need to look at. How are we impacting the land? And how are we impacting our residents? And how are we impacting our quality of life? So with that, I'll turn it over to Supervisor Nelson for any comments.
Thank you, Supervisor Taylor. Hope you guys can hear me okay. But as a supervisor and a farmer, fifth generation farmer at that, who hopes to turn over the farm to my 5- and 3-year-old someday, we have heard over and over and over again from citizens within this county that we've got some amazing natural resources that we need to capitalize, whether that's agriculture, whether that's recreational. That's the intended use for the land here. And this is not anti-green energy. What we are saying is that in the current offering of commercial wind and commercial solar today, it does not mesh well with the agricultural land and the recreational land that we have here in Woodbury County. And I think it's important to note that this resolution derives from the very people that would be affected by these types of projects, the very people that would live next to wind turbines, the very people that would lose farming acres to a commercial solar farm or would have to live next to it, the people who live in these small communities, who many of these community leaders have come to these very meetings and expressed these very concerns that are laid out in this resolution, that would lose business on the recreation side from people not wanting to visit. And so it's just a culmination that, or it's an idea that we need to do better on these commercial energy projects to really fit with what we want out of Woodbury County. We want families here. We need kids in school. We need families in churches and in our communities volunteering. And some of these projects just simply are not a means for us to accomplish that goal. And so it's I really appreciate this. I've had just an overwhelming amount of positive feedback about this, even in this week from last week. I'm glad we're having 2 hearings. I think we'll have a lot more input tonight. But I look forward to some of the discussion, and thank you to the board for having this on the agenda, and thank you to Jeremy for your work on this as well.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Supervisor Bittinger or Radig?
So, does this resolution ban anything?
Not at all.
Are there any teeth in the resolution that prohibits anything in Woodbury County?
No. It's a guide for the kind of future planning for the sustainability of the families that live, work, and reside here that are reliant. But there is nothing with a resolution that binds this board or a future board. It is along the lines of messaging and setting the tone and tenor for how we want to grow.
So, and again, as far as like the CO2 pipeline, it doesn't really stop anything. It just says we don't support it.
Right.
Well, essentially, the use of eminent domain, which is, you know, I think that's something we've all made our statements on too. I guess, you know, I just got back. I read the resolution. I did have a question on the last paragraph. It says impacting land. We probably should say agricultural land or farmland, something along those lines, because technically there's no form of energy really that doesn't impact land. You know, even batteries with lithium or cobalt, you know, they're renewable energy, but at the same time impacts land pretty dramatically. I mean, even hydroelectric, you know, I mean, that's been used with eminent domain in the past, you know, taking out entire cities to build a dam. And, you know, it's a renewable energy source, but yeah, it sure had an impact to the land. So I would maybe look at some clarity on that in that item, saying agricultural land or something. I guess what are we accomplishing other than putting something on paper?
I think we're messaging that if there is a new energy industry that comes into Woodbury County and is going to use forced means to take from private landowners, or is going to impact their safety and that of their children, or is going to degrade the land in such a way as to minimize it for future generations, that messaging is that Woodbury County is not necessarily the place that we want you to be.
But technically, you can't stop anybody.
Right, this resolution in and of itself doesn't, as with every resolution that we pass
Right.
on the board, doesn't have the effect of law.
Right.
Doesn't bind a future board.
And in the past, I've not had a very, common approach of voting for most resolutions if there's not a real impact, So I guess I'd like to hear more discussion from the rest of the board, but, I guess I would say I don't support the use of eminent domain and energy projects here in Woodbury County, and I don't support anything that's going to destroy farmland at Woodbury County against a farmer's wishes. But at the end of the day, we really don't have the ability to stop, say, if a CO2 pipeline comes in and that's all done under federal, or if they decide they're going to dam the Little Sioux River and that takes out some farm ground. As a board of supervisors, we really don't have that control.
Do you mind if I respond?
Go ahead.
I agree that ultimately, right now with what's in front of the IUB, that a lot of people feel powerless. But that hasn't stopped people from coming week after week after week. That hasn't stopped this board of supervisors from enjoining with other counties in a legal matter. And instead of, and I'm not suggesting you're doing this, but instead of just saying, well, the cake is baked, we all know that it's going through your private property, whether you want it or not. We're fighting, and we're trying to take what we believe are the majority of our constituents and saying, this is what we can do. We can send messages, we can write letters, we can enjoin legally, we can do all of the above to give people a voice. And so, is this the solve all or the panacea? Probably not. But is this yet one more statement that we can make? I think it collectively speaks to the voices. That's my opinion.
Anything you want to add at this point, Mr. Bittinger?
No, I think everything's been said. The only thing I would add is that I would say, I think on the board, we're for all forms of energy. I'm for all forms of energy, hands down. But I think the issue is, for me, is two things. It's the Commerce Clause in the Constitution. A lot of the green energy policies and ESG mandates come down to the Commerce Clause. For me, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3, the Congress shall have the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with the Indian tribes. I think all this goes back to commerce and what can be forced. And my two questions for us, I think, I do agree with you, Jeremy, right? We don't have the power to change anything, but I do think it's sending a signaling. I mean, the key word right now is virtual signaling, right? It's all been going on the last 3 years, virtual signaling. I don't think we're virtual signaling. I think what we're saying is, to me, it's two issues, that the state and local county governments and the federal government, do they have the power to either mandate certain types of energy? If you look at the Commerce Clause to regulate commerce by this definition of the 1828 definition of what the Congress used, I would say no. They cannot force or mandate any type. They can't force coal, they can't force wind, solar, whatever, upon a certain individual or a private enterprise. So that's the first question I think we were trying to address with resolution, is that no, the government doesn't have that mandate or the ability. Commerce is supposed to be an equal exchange between two parties, not a government interjecting itself. And then secondly, for me, the main one is subsidies. Does the government have the ability to favor one form of energy or another? Can the government create a monopoly by its own means through funding and favoring of one energy sector? whether it's clean or non-clean. Do they have the power to use subsidies, which is taxpayer money? There is no government money or public money. It's you and I's money, your money, to favor a industry, and I would say no. So to me, it's this resolution also signals that we are against subsidies, and which we are seeing is driving a lot of this. It's been said by Mid-America's CEO that owner that he wouldn't do one with Mid-America if it wasn't because of the subsidies. And so, I mean, that's out there on MSNBC, NBC. You can go Google that. But, so once again, it comes down to me, it's government money, government funding. But I'm all for any type of energy, do it. But as long as it's not, I agree with eminent domain, as long as it's not forced or mandated by Congress or by local supervisor board or a state, go get it. Free enterprise. I'm all for it. Invent, create. But I do think we need to say that there has to be some limits to government with that. So I'd vote for it. I'd vote for this resolution. I agree. It's not banning anything. So if you got a project, bring it to Woodbury County. But make sure it's clean. Make sure it's going to go through the right channels. Make sure it's going to not use eminent domain and take, or force extra taxes or regulations. I think my concern too is with the clean energy, which is fine, some of the extra regulations and government regulations, which we know is crippling the nation. There's 75,000 laws in the books already, federal laws in the books. It's adding more and more. That's crippling, I think. So I think if the government, people want clean energy, then it should be private enterprise and not subsidized by the government nor forced or mandated. And I think this resolution helps just send the message right. We can't stop it. I agree with you, Keith. This isn't law-abiding. This isn't law. People can still come in and do stuff, but I agree with you, Supervisor Taylor. It is sending a message to a lot of our constituents who have shown up consistently to say that they don't want some of the things that are happening right now in Woodbury County. And so I'll support it for that reason.
Sorry to interrupt. Would y'all please speak into your mics? We can only hear about half what you're saying. We want to hear it, but please speak in your mics.
Thank you. Is this good?
Yes.
Okay. For my part, I would say, as others have said, resolution is a message, it's a signal, it's not binding. I think we know that. I hope we know that in the room. I believe that most of the disagreement today will probably be upon the interpretation of that message and the signal that it sends, maybe less so what it actually is intended to say and what others may believe it says. I think that our actions have spoken louder already than this resolution in regards to our steps to regulate wind, to encourage private development of solar. We've asked the Planning and Zoning Commission and the Board of Adjustment to look into that. We've also taken legal avenues to mitigate the damages from the pipelines given the legislature's inaction, which is very harmful to the entire process. And we've also resisted calls from those publicly to immediately advocate the closing of Port Neal. We realize over several years there'll be a wind down period. It'll probably hopefully be repurposed rather than scuttled, but immediately damaging our infrastructure is not in the long-term health of our county either. As we take public comment, I would ask those that want to comment to make clear whether you're for or against, which will probably be clear, but also if you have amendments. If there is something specific you would like addressed or changed, I believe that can be addressed by the board. If one of us wants to make an amendment motion, we can look at doing it that way so we have an orderly and clean process to either pass something that is agreeable to the board or vote it up or down. With that, I'd like to make sure we have a motion on the table, so would you gentlemen like to make that motion?
I'll move the resolution.
Second.
Motion by Taylor, second by Bittinger. On the resolution as written, again, if there are amendments, please clearly state those requests. The rules for the board are not my own rules, they're the board's rules. There'll be a 3-minute time limit. Our parliamentarian will keep track of that for you. You need to state your name and address, and I'd ask that everyone just speak once. We've heard from everyone here, I think, most everyone here before, some several times. And so I want to make sure that everyone has a chance to speak. Everyone will have a chance to speak. Doesn't necessarily mean you'll have a chance to run the meeting, so I would respectfully ask that if you want to have a debate with someone else in the audience, please do that after the meeting. This is to help the board come to a decision on this agenda item. So with that, is the board ready to open it up to public comment? Great. If you've come to give comment on this, please come forward.
Hello, my name is Trisha Rivers, Sioux City, Iowa residents. I'm also the native representative for Sioux City's Inclusive Committee, and I would like to know did you guys consult with communities of colors when creating this resolution?
No, we did not,
And why not?
because the resolution affects all people equally.
Well, yeah. So our voices need to be heard too, as well.
Right, and I think that's one of the reasons that we're listening, and we'll give you back the floor.
So as the native representative for this city, I would really highly encourage you to go back and listen to communities of color, because we are the ones that get hit the hardest when it comes to these extractive projects.
My name's Alan McGaffin. I'm a resident of Sioux City, and it's a resolution I'm having trouble understanding, and it surprises me, and I'm sorry I was late. Train time, perfect time, but if Mid-America is in favor of this, it seems as though they're acting in contradiction, because it's Mid-America's stated goal that they wish to be, by the year 2050, they wish to be carbon neutral, and they're working that direction. I think their latest figures are 88.5% carbon neutral at present. In point 3 of the resolution, we talk about cost effectiveness, and that's where it becomes also contradictory, because the fossil fuel industry, as we've heard for decades, and as is true, the fossil fuel industry is a recipient of tremendous amounts of subsidies. Each year, about $20 billion in subsidies to the fossil fuel industry. They seem to feel, and the fossil fuel industry is correct, I'm assuming, they seem to think that they are always going to receive a public subsidy for drilling for their business practices, whereas alternative forms of energy are not guaranteed that. They may see their subsidy or tax breaks or whatever public help they may receive on a 2 or 3 year basis, and then it comes back for renewal to see if it's worthwhile. The fossil fuel industry is never put to those kinds of questions as to whether it's cost effective. That's $20 billion a year, and over the course of the lifetime of fossil fuel subsidies, I think the number is $19 to $20 trillion that the public has subsidized the fossil fuel industry to extract. That is not cost effective, and it confuses me. How does the resolution address cost effectiveness? I don't see how it is. I don't understand long-term safety of agriculture. The way agriculture is presently conducted, it's not sustainable. We've already heard in the last several years as fertilizer prices have climbed so high that it's becoming more and more and more difficult to provide the fertilization that they can provide to maximize their yields. We need to find a more sustainable way of practicing and producing agriculture. Perhaps turning the time frame down a little bit when it comes to producing hogs and cattle. That assembly line is way too fast right now. As we can see, we're floating in manure in Iowa. So there's questions I have about the resolution. It's just not clear to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bob Fritzmeyer, I'm at 2933 Leach here in Sioux City. Last Sunday, I was driving to church just in the morning across the viaduct here in Sioux City. I live in Morningside, and I was heading west, and there was a haze, almost like a fog, hanging over the city. And then I turned on the news, and the news was reporting right then that across much of Iowa and other parts of the United States, there were air quality warnings. In some cases, warning people to stay indoors. The wildfires in Canada were raging. And according to the scientific community, that's going to continue and it's going to get worse. Those kinds of catastrophes, they could turn into a catastrophe. It's a warning right now. And we have a choice. We have definite choices to either acknowledge things like that, what's the events across the country, or to close our eyes or look to the past, to look at, yes, I appreciate what Woodbury County has done historically in terms of generating energy. And I also see now as an opportunity to look to the future and to keep making the transitions that have been going on to renewable energies for the future generations of life and electricity. The United States Senate Budget Committee met in May of this year, and they had a hearing. It was called "Who Pays the Price? The Real Cost of Fossil Fuels." And a statement was made there by one of the leaders of that committee that the threat that climate change poses to entire sectors of our economy are as follows: healthcare, as the air was here in Sioux City last Sunday. Insurance. It's come to my attention that in the state of California, the insurance companies have stopped insuring the properties that are, close to these horrible wildfires that have claimed people's lives. There are coastal economies that we know have been affected harshly and fatally by the hurricanes, by tornadoes. And as far as I appreciate what Mr. McGaffin said, and I just want to follow up on one of his points, actually, just to expand on it. The International Energy Agency said that in 2022, fossil fuel subsidies across the globe hit $1 trillion. And in that same year, big oil's profits hit $4 trillion.
Hi, I'm, which one is live, or are they both?
They're both.
I'm Renee Weinberg, 3905 Country Club in Sioux City, Iowa. I just think that it's, the resolution is a little bit confusing. It needs to have some clarification. That second whereas, where it says several energy ideas are short-sighted, I'm wondering, specifically which ones you're talking about. And then later on, it says you're supporting coal and gas, and you're also saying that certain ones are not subsidized. Well, coal and gas is subsidized, as you've just heard, and coal is not clean. It's not sustainable. Coal ash, which is a residue when you burn coal, has horrendous toxins that are contained in that ash, including things like chromium, arsenic, mercury, cyanide, strontium. Strontium is radioactive. Mid-American Energy has actually applied to the group that oversees them and their operations. They want to actually dump, because they have so much coal ash that's been building up in their facilities down in the Neil plants. They've actually applied to dump that into the Missouri River. That would cause massive pollution that would dramatically affect the tribes all along the river that are south of those plants, and anyone else south of Sioux City. That is a massive water pollution, and I don't think that's been ruled on yet, but I think it's still pending. Not only that, every single day that those plants run, and I don't think anyone here is saying they have to close immediately. I think that Mid-American has actually said they would retire the plants in 2050, but they're actually, slowing down the amount of money that they're putting into those plants. And those people, yes, will need jobs. But every single day that those plants run, they're putting sulfur, nitrogen dioxide, and CO2 into the air. And anyone that has problems with breathing, with COPD, with any lung issues, or has any kind of chronic illness, they're breathing this air every single day. It's affecting people's health. That's why people are not pro-coal. Yes, it was something that this country has back in the 20s and 30s and 40s, and even now, and other parts of the world, India and China, use coal, but the whole world is warming up. And if you watch the news any day, you see what's happening. It's affecting farming, it's affecting the temperature, it's affecting the bees. I have bees on my property, and for the last 4 years, my bees have died because of the extreme temperature changes. So coal is not sustainable, and the fastest growing jobs are in wind and in solar. They're being taught in our schools to students, and so to say that you don't support wind energy, it's not something that's being forced on anyone. Nobody's taking their land and saying you have to have wind generators. But if somebody wants it, they should have that availability, so.
Thank you.
If I can just respond, I agree with you. On your last point, if somebody wants to have wind, then they should be able to have that. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sakawa Nobis. I'm the executive director of Great Plains Action Society. We do a lot of work here in Sioux City and across this area. And yes, we are concerned about this resolution and the language concerning traditional ways of producing energy. That means that you are for the coal plants south of Sioux City. And that's problematic to me as an Indigenous person, because these coal plants sit directly north of the Winnebago and Omaha nations, and they are directly south of Sioux City, where we have Iowa's largest concentration of Indigenous peoples living. And, we know that these places are often frontline areas and areas that are not getting proper consultation. And as this last person just spoke about, right now, Neil is lobbying the state government to release their leachate into the water, and that goes directly into the Winnebago Nation in the Missouri River. I hope that there's some kind of consultation going on there. I hope that there's some kind of understanding of UNDRIP, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, so you know about free, prior, and informed consent to discuss these issues with neighboring tribes, and also understanding that there is such a large Indigenous population here, not just Indigenous, Black and Latino, Latina, and migrant. And these conversations need to be had with those folks as well, because do you see representation here? No, you don't. And why? Because these systems haven't been set up to like actually reach out to these communities in the way that they need to be reached out to, because these systems were never set up for them in the first place to be here. So there needs to be a different way of consulting with folks so that they can get this information. And also, you know, like what is traditional, and why stick with traditions when they are harming us? Right now, we are facing record temperatures across the entire country. And that is, you know, very scary, especially for those of us with children that care about our children's future. And so please, you know, consider that Iowa is one of the record number, it's got a record number for wind energy here in this country. The state can produce a lot of wind energy. And we should start thinking about investing into these types of renewables, because honestly, it's a better way for all of us. And you can make a lot of money off that too, because I know that's what you're mostly interested in: free market, free enterprise. Go ahead, make that money, but please, you know, don't kill us all in the process. Thank you.
I am curious on the claims of this Mid-American wanting to dump its fly ash into the river, because I know for a fact Mid-American stockpiles fly ash. As it gets rained on, it becomes sea stone, and that's a marketable product that they use in all our roads in this area. So I don't understand why there would be any desire by Mid-American to stick any of that in the river, because it's like throwing money in the river for them. So I'm just throwing that out there.
Anyone else wishing to comment?
Daniel Hare, 2889 Humboldt Avenue, Hornick, Iowa. First of all, I'm going to start off by saying that there is a God, and he created the earth. And if you don't believe that, you got bigger problems. The earth will go on until God decides otherwise. As far as this smoke from California, from Canada, my whole lifetime, California's been on fire. And we weren't fussing about the climate back then in the 1980s. This climate alarmism and green energy religion are not going to control my life in Woodbury County. I'm not drinking that Kool-Aid. The green energy is no more than environmental terrorism. This green energy religion is exploiting thousands of people in areas like the Congo and China, where women and children and men are being abused day in and day out, where they mine for cobalt and copper, materials needed to make your electric cars, your batteries, your wind turbines, and solar panels. They are man, it's my time to talk. I'll ask you to be quiet. We are destroying thousands and thousands of acres of the earth, mining for these kind of materials and exploiting people in the process. And you want to come up here and preach to us about racism? That's extreme racism.
Please address the board when you're speaking.
Just addressing the comment that was made to me from the floor. By rejecting these radical ideas and embracing reliable power and common sense practices, Woodbury County will be on the rise while other counties will decline. And as a farmer, we are the environmental stewards. We're producing more with less, and we are doing it smartly. There isn't some big fertilizer discrepancy. The supply chain got messed up during COVID. We're putting way less fertilizer on today and growing a lot more higher yielding crops than we ever thought possible. From my grandpa's generation to my dad's generation to my generation, it'll be amazing to see what happens in my son's lifetime. So as far as I'm concerned, this resolution is 100% common sense. It should be a 5-0 decision from you guys. I think you're headed in the right direction. We need to protect what we have here in this county for future generations so that we can keep being proud to call Woodbury County home. So thanks a lot, you guys, and let's get it voted on.
Thank you.
Can we
Anyone
have
else?
a reminder to let others speak without comment?
Hi, Monica Gooddon. I'm a Sioux City resident. I would just like to say that from the coal plant, the pollution is one of our top pollutants in the Sioux City area. Also, I hear a lot of talk about land and protecting agricultural land. The coal plant, it's not even safe to be within 20 miles of. We're talking about jobs, but we're not talking about the safety of the jobs that are being performed. When we're talking about the future and we're talking about our children, our grandchildren, and our grandchildren's children, coal is not a renewable source of energy. This is not something that's keeping us safe. It's keeping our lights on. And there's a difference between that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Tom Trahern. I'm the project manager for NextEra Energy Resources. Our company has been in Woodbury County working with property owners to develop renewable energy projects for some time, and we plan to invest millions of dollars to support the local economy in the near future. We were drawn to Woodbury County because of the natural resources and the openness we found in the county policies and ordinances. That said, the resolution before you this evening appears to be contrary to existing plans and policies in the county and would make it difficult for renewable projects to move forward. We feel that many of the statements in the resolution are unfounded and will be damaging to the county and dissuade future investment. Further, we feel more time should be taken to seek public opinion on such strong statements, as NextEra is working with many property owners that see benefits in renewable and bring both benefits to their families and businesses. Our projects are built on relationships and trust. We respect private property rights, and we will not, nor can we, use eminent domain in developing our projects. Our projects are being built to ensure a sustainable future, ones which can be built on a variety of energy sources, whether it be solar, wind, battery, hydrogen. There's a multitude of projects that can be accomplished in conjunction with gas and coal. Our technologies are proven to be proven in the marketplace and are all across the state operating effectively and efficiently. Our projects bring jobs and economic development to each of the counties we partner with. As an example, the wind industry directly employs approximately 4,000 employees across the state. There are 53 Iowa companies in the wind industry supply chain. Wind energy accounts for at least $22 billion in capital investment in and across the state of Iowa. Wind turbines generate $67 million annually in lease payments to property owners. Google, Apple, Facebook are among some of the companies that have identified the ability or the availability of low-cost wind energy as a reason for them to coming to the state of Iowa. So that is true economic development. Wind energy provides significant tax revenue to local governments and has contributed approximately $57 million in tax revenue in 2021 alone. So there's a lot of statistics across the state. I realize that's not specific to Woodbury County, but that's the impact that the wind industry in itself has on the state of Iowa. I didn't even address solar or battery or any other technologies. What we're here tonight to do is just ask that you think carefully about the message the resolution sends, and not only to NextEra, but other companies that are investors in your county. We would ask that you choose not to approve the resolution, but rather strive to understand the renewable energy market in a little more detail before such a policy decision is made. Or alternatively, take a look at the resolution and remove the context of renewables as a wholehearted blanket piece of legislation. It's my understanding that a lot of this was born out of eminent domain. Most of the renewables do not use eminent domain. It's a private transaction between a property owner and a company. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
Steve Merlo, 1540 Dallas Avenue. I've got a Mid-American wanted to put wind energy up on 120th and Franklin, and they wanted eminent domain, about 10 acres of mine, about a year ago. They started the process, but someone else gave them some ground underneath the power line. But yes, they wanted to use eminent domain on me.
Good day. My name is Mahmoud Fatil. I'm coming here today to speak about this resolution. As you're aware, resolution is forming policy for your county and it has lasting implications beyond today and your decision. We've heard from several people today. It includes environmental impacts as well as economic impacts for your community. The whole world is transitioning to different types of fuels. Coal is antiquated technology of yesteryear, and they're rapidly transitioning. I understand that there is a desire for certain interests who perhaps are financially involved or they work in the industry to maintain such infrastructure, but we cannot allow that to be done at the peril of our communities. Our air quality, our atmosphere, our environment should be a public trust, and as such, you have a grave responsibility to everyone here as well as the future generations to come after. We've heard testimony today of people concerned about the air quality in this community. They've been concerned about plans of Mid-American to submit to the NDR request to dump more coal ash into the river. And we've heard concerns about eminent domain and these carbon capture pipelines, which is the hot button issue around Iowa for at least 2 years now that some people don't talk about, but it seems to be an elephant in the room, particularly with regard to this resolution. While we support some of the language there against the pipelines and the abuse of eminent domain against private parties, for something that is, essentially a usage or a vehicle for public domain or public interest and is being used to privatize and put forth judgments for private industry and profiteering. However, in crafting our policy, we must also make sure that we're not short-sighted and that we're addressing a few key issues that are popular, bipartisan throughout the state, and at the same time, disregard our future generations and the other pressing issues. We've seen unprecedented air quality alerts here in Iowa. Growing up in this community, in this area, most of us haven't endured that. Yeah, there are prairie fires, there are controlled burns down in Kansas, but nothing to the effect that we've seen in the last recent years. For at least the last 5 years or so, Iowa's been enduring drought as well. So this is an issue that affects everybody, regardless of your thoughts or beliefs on climate change and environmental policy. We heard from the shareholders meeting at Mid-American that Warren Buffett says even renewables are cheaper, so they're looking to invest in that and divest. Some of the issues and politics involved with energy and utilities are such that they do idle the wind energy in order to continue burning the coal. And as it's been signaled by the company's owner itself that they're going to phase that out, it doesn't make sense to lock in provisions like this in such a policy. I would urge you to think about the future generations, to think about your fellow community members and perhaps those disenfranchised, more affected further downstream. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Sir, can you repeat your name and address for the record, please?
Yes, my name is Mahmoud Fitil. I'm in 2109 Vinton Street.
Can you spell that?
Mahmud space Fitil.
Thank you.
There's also a side-end street in the back, I believe, right? Yeah. Anyone else like to address the board?
I'm Joanne Sadler, Correctionville, Iowa. And I realize you've heard a lot about the CO2 pipeline, and that is one aspect, but that's really not an energy idea per se, to be lumped in with solar and wind and all of these other types of things. So, to be opposed to that, I am opposed to those CO2 pipelines, and I appreciate all the listening you've done to the people who have been concerned about the wind turbines. But I'm opposed to the terminology where you have that you support coal, and then in the second to last bullet point where you say supposed green energy. I mean, I don't think there's anything really supposed about it. So I urge you just to scrap this because, I don't really think it sends a good message.
Floor is still open, if anyone else.
Doyle Turner, 2738 200th Street. I definitely support this resolution completely, but I do think there are some good points that are made here in opposition, and I do think that we can kind of find a middle ground here. One thing that we haven't talked about is coal gasification. Some people have mentioned some of the toxic things that are in coal. They're there. But you know what? If we use coal gasification, it tears that coal down to its basic units, And every one of those toxins are an industrial commodity that are then sold. This is not new technology. The Germans used it in World War II because they didn't have much coal. You can make jet fuel, gasoline, diesel fuel, all sorts of things from that coal, and you can still have good, clean coal to burn when you're done. Our co-ops, our electric co-ops that run our electricity out in the rural area, actually own a coal gasification in Beulah, North Dakota, I believe. It's Basin Electric is I believe the company that actually owns it. So this is not new technology, but it's something that if we were to add this to the mix, it would not only give us a cleaner end product, but it would also give us a whole lot of opportunity to produce other fuels out of that coal other than just electricity. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Elizabeth Widman. I live at 1665 220th Street, Sergeant Bluff, and my sons are fifth generation Woodbury County farmers. And I was here when we talked about the wind turbines. And I'm hearing from a lot of people that don't live in the country, and some of these projects wouldn't be right in their backyard. And when I talked about the wind turbines, I brought a letter from the Les Hills Scenic Byways Coalition talking about viewage in Woodbury County as far as the turbines were concerned. And when you have a wind turbine put up, they have to get a permit to kill so many eagles, because they're dangerous for the birds. And I just think that there isn't just this evil on one side, and then we have renewable that has no downsides at all. And I support this resolution because especially with the carbon pipeline and using eminent domain, they want to put this carbon pipeline right next to my property in the field not too far from my home. And if you would happen to have a leakage in the pipeline, it immediately kills all animals, anybody around. It's a very dangerous thing. So there are downsides to the other sides, their points of view. And like I said, a lot of these people wouldn't live right in the area of these things happening. I do. And so I just appreciate that you're willing to do this, and just say I support this, and I hope you vote for it.
Kim Alexander, Smithland, Iowa. I want to again commend you gentlemen for bringing up this resolution. Appreciate all the points that have been brought up. I especially appreciate these young folks and not so young folks that have come and expressed their opinions. This is sustainable government right here at the community level, and this is very important. One of the folks mentioned about having different ways to reach out to the indigenous population. This is how it's done. There may be other ways. They can go back and talk to folks, but this is county supervision, county government at the basic level that we can come and speak our piece. So again, I commend you all. Several things, and I'm for the resolution. It's not perfect, but it really is, as I said last week, a shot across the bow, to use maritime analogy. It's a shot across the bow of the unsustainable, unrenewable, multinational investment companies like Vanguard and BlackRock that are coming in and trying to do this carbon capture pipeline. And it's also a shot across the bow for big companies that are not renewable. And so I commend you all for your stand on this. This is all about local control. That's what the resolution is ultimately about, is local control. Several things I want to touch on. I'm a farmer. as far back as we can trace our family history. My family's been farming. I raise organic beef, lamb, pasture chickens, orchard and garden down in the Luss Hills near Smithland, and that is the ultimate renewable. And so organic farming is the ultimate renewability. And the way we get that, a lot of stuff's come out about farming, and well, we don't like this type of farming, that type of farming. Everyone has the ability to vote with their dollars what kind of farming they want. They have the ability to vote with their dollars what kind of energy they want. So what's not renewable is these big multi-acre solar farms, wind farms, the carbon capture pipeline stuff. That is not renewable in any way. The Canadian smoke was brought up. Yeah, we deal with it. Can't see 5 miles ahead when that smoke's covering the area. But if you'll do a little research on that, it's real interesting. Those fires all started right about the same time up in Canada, and here we are dealing with it. Dig a little deeper. That's my point. The whole wind energy is great. One of my goals is to have my own wind generator on my farm. I make my own fuel. I heat with wood. I grow my own food. I'm about as green and sustainable I can get, but I still want to do a little more with the wind energy. But big scale wind energy is worthless without storage, without battery storage. Mr. Radig was very correct when he brought up about the land that is being ruined, mining for those minerals to make those batteries, and so much of it is done with children of disadvantaged communities. You know, people of color, kids of color. It's wrong, and we don't want to support that. Is that my time? All right. Again, thank you. I appreciate it. And I would just say, do not give in to the fear of the whole climate change hoax. It's all about fear. This is about faith and moving forward. Thank you, gentlemen.
Steve Corey, Salix, Iowa, 1757 290th Street. After hearing everything today, I was here last week, as you know, been very involved in pushing back against the CO2 pipelines. I will continue to be, but there seems to be an opportunity here in this whole context, for things to come together with people of different thought processes regarding the future of energy. A lot of renewable energy, if you do dig down deep inside, you'll find that it currently, the way it's being manufactured, the way it's being sold, subsidized. Even our friend from Berkshire Hathaway, the CEO of the company, made it very clear. He said, I wouldn't be putting up these big wind turbines if I wasn't getting subsidized for it. These are the things that need to be looked at. I don't disagree that at some point we need to continue to seek new forms of energy, but they've got to be in harmony with our planet and with the people that live on this planet. So I think there's an opportunity here for dialogue amongst both sides of this, but right now we've got to stop, as the previous speaker said, we've got to stop these monster corporations from coming in and dictating to us what they're going to do to our land and to the people who live on that land. I do support the resolution as it's written. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to address the board?
Not by the rules. Would have to be the chair that would be willing to give those.
All right, is the board willing to end public comment?
Seeing no one else approach, I believe that would be appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Hearing no other objections from board members, the public comment period is closed. The board will now discuss, and if Mr. Taylor or Nelson would like to address any of the questions posed about the resolution, they're welcome to. If any other supervisors would like to then follow up with additional comments, they're welcome to as well. Mr. Taylor, Mr. Nelson.
Thank you very much. I'd just make a couple of comments in response. First off, I'm appreciative of the discussion on both sides. We welcome, and it's rare to get this many people in a room for a supervisors meeting, so if nothing else, hearing from you makes sense. The other thing I alluded to last week, there's one issue I think everybody in the room universally has spoken against the use of eminent domain on carbon pipelines. So I have yet to hear one person, so if there's common ground that everybody can join in on, it's that. And I hope that message reverberates within the Golden Dome and all across the state of Iowa. Fundamentally, this is about freedom. It's about the freedom to use your land as you so choose. We have had some aggressiveness, I believe, on the curating of wind, and I believe that we have gone through a process that people out in our rural area have said this is how far we believe setbacks need to be in order to be safe. We've heard from our conservation board that said this is how far we believe from our conservation areas, and we've adopted ordinances and policies based upon that. But at the end of the day, I loved hearing when Kim Alexander said, I want to put a wind on my property. That is his right to do, and that is good if he so chooses. We have not banned wind by any stretch or any means. We're saying by this resolution, we don't want it forced upon people. We don't want people forced to have solar, as has been raised the specter of in Greene County through the use of eminent domain. If that's what it takes to take place, then we don't want that. But if people so choose, we just passed something, was that 2 weeks ago? I think you were here, Keith, that made it even easier to put solar, and that is good. That's about freedom and about what you want to do with your land. I will not make any comments on what Mid-American is or is not going to do because I'm not an expert in their internal policies. But we do know that the jobs that use clean coal technology right now at Port Neal are something that we are supportive of in those families. And as for the other points of this, we do want to be committed to the land, to free market capitalism, and to taxation or subsidies that are fair across the board. So with that, those would be my comments. And again, appreciation for everybody that showed up. I see people from the past that I highly respect and continue to respect who are involved on both sides. Thank you very much.
I do have more comments, but I thought you were going to have Mark talk too.
Well, I sure would, Keith, if unless you want to go first. So.
Go ahead here. I want to read this over again.
Okay. Yeah, just to echo what Supervisor Taylor just said, really appreciate everybody being here. I'm glad that we've had 2 hearings on this resolution where we've heard from a lot of different people from all across the county. I really appreciate what Mrs. Widman said in her comments about people seem to be for some of these projects when they don't affect them. And I think that's overwhelmingly what we've heard from our farmers, our rural acreage dwellers, from our rural communities, is that some of these projects really do negatively affect them. And so since they're the ones that are going to be the most affected, we should really give heed to what it is that they need from us. And I think that this resolution does that. Supervisor Taylor mentioned that the solar company in Greene County has been telling landowners there that if they don't sign up, what they view as happening with the carbon pipelines will give them a channel to get eminent domain for solar and wind projects in the future. I think that the effect of giving eminent domain in this carbon pipeline project is going to have some really nasty effects down the road. And I think if some of these energy companies are already talking about it, they see it as a possibility for them, which also scares the heck out of me and as of others. So that's why we've included that portion in this resolution, is because it is being talked about across the state. And I think that's something that nobody wants us to see. And I'm glad that everybody in the room is in unison on eminent domain for these carbon pipelines and that it's wrong. And I hope that there's some folks in the Iowa legislature and maybe our governor that can maybe watch this meeting and see what's been happening in Woodbury County meetings for months now. And I applaud all those carbon pipeline landowners that have been coming to all these meetings and filling us in for so long. And I hope that you can keep the faith and keep the fight. But I think that we should pass this resolution, and again, appreciate everybody's time on this.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson, and thank you for representing the rural constituency so well. That's certainly a block that's impacted by a lot of these ideas more than others. Mr.
So, of course, you guys all know that I just got back from El Salvador on a trip, mission trip. And I gotta tell you, it kind of changed the perspective on a lot of things that we do over here. It's the whole, what they call first world problems, I guess. We're sitting looking at ourselves with a microscope. Oh, sorry, am I not in there enough? We're looking at ourselves with a microscope, but the rest of the world doesn't even have a lens, you know. 6.7 billion people live in third world conditions in 152 countries around the world. It's 85% of our population lives a much different life than we do. They don't have sanitation. And, you know, going into a house where you flush the toilet and the pipe goes under the house into a gutter in the street, and then seeing how, when I was on city council, we were forced to spend between 30 and 40 million dollars to remove microscopic traces of nitrogen and phosphate from our wastewater. When we were done with the project, I had our staff actually measure before and after we were done with the project to see if we made an impact in the river, and the impact was unmeasurable. They couldn't even make an impact. And for every city that's done this on the entire Missouri River, you can go to Louisiana and there's still no measurable impact from all the millions and millions of dollars spent. And, you know, we feel good maybe because we did this, but at the same time, we're looking again, like I said, with a microscope on our country, things, spending millions on stuff you can't even measure. You know, they burn everything down there. They burn their trash. They just, you know, they would love to have coal. They would love to have any kind of energy source. You know, I did notice that diesel fuel was only like $2.50 or something a gallon down there versus, I did the conversion from liters. I know how to do that. You know, we spend quite a bit more up here, and then gasoline down there was quite a bit more than what we pay. So it was interesting, but you know, you look at, so, you know, in our second line, we got cost-effective energy rather than those that purport to be cost-effective. You know, we may subsidize an energy company a little, but they get a lot off the top. So in America, at least in Iowa, 60 cents of every gallon of diesel is taxation. So over 10% of that price of diesel, and of course diesel fuels all shipping and everything, and of course in the business I'm in, shipping is a big part of costs. And you know, here in America we tax the heck out of diesel fuel, and everybody pays for it because they buy products at grocery stores. They buy things anywhere, it's got to be shipped. So personally, I wouldn't mind seeing the cost-effective line just taken out. Energy industries that steward, I would say, agricultural land and not degrade the soil. And then on the last line, it says the land, I would say, of Woodbury County, because it's our resolution for future generations. But yeah, I mean, I agree with what a lot of people have said here in the room today. I typically am not in favor of resolutions that really don't have any teeth, that don't really change anything. And I know you say it does, but really it doesn't, because any election, the board changes and people can do and vote however they want. Zoning is not us. Planning and zoning is its own board of people, and they make their own decisions. But yeah, I would just encourage people to, I guess, you know, get out there in the world and see how the rest of the world does it, because, you know, in America, we used to burn coal in every house, not 20 miles away in one plant. And, you know, we look at it through the lens of what we see here today. And I would love to see NextEra invest more in, you know, some solar plants in our county, and you know, I just want it to be done in a way, and I think there's technology there that you can do it in a way that doesn't, you know, degrade ag land, especially with solar, because you know, I've seen pivoting towers and things that can direct even water into hay ground and everything to actually help shade and water the ground as you plant. And I don't think, as a Board of Supervisors, we want to diminish any project like that. So, from where I'm sitting, I don't see that we do that with this resolution. I do think if we take that second line out, because really, in reality, what energy isn't subsidized in any way, shape, or form? Everything gets some kind of subsidy at different times. The entire infrastructure that took rural power out to the county is probably why we don't have windmills on every farm like there used to be with Sioux City's Wind Charger Company making those for everybody in the past. So, I brought up my own dad having struggles before in the past putting solar panels on his place in Polk County, of all places, right? Polk County, as liberal as it is, he had it took him 3 years to get solar panels on his garage. Nobody can see him, right? But that county gave him a hard time because of zoning regulations, and where he lives and right-of-ways and everything. It was ridiculous. But like I said, I want us to be a county of land rights. If you have the land, you have the right to do with it what you see fit for you and your family and your next generation. So those are the changes I would like to see made on the resolution. Whether or not you guys support that, that's up to you. But I do think we want to be specific on agricultural land and land of Woodbury County. And then, like I said, with the subsidies, we have no control over any of that anyway. That's all federal stuff, state stuff that we don't even have anything to do with. My comments.
Where did you want to add in ag land in Woodbury County, Keith?
All right, so energy industries that steward agricultural land and do not degrade the soil in such ways as erosion, compaction, water quality, and wildlife ecosystems, and preserve our most valuable natural resource, the land of Woodbury County, for future generations.
And the other with Woodbury, that's in there?
That's all right there.
Yeah.
Yep, as I read.
I have no objection.
I have no objections to that either. I think it's great.
Is there any other clarifications you needed on?
Well, and I do
items?
think we just strike the whole cost-effective energy rather than those purport to be cost-effective, because in reality, there is no such thing as cost-effective energy. As a whole, our energy rates are probably the lowest they've been in a long time just because of inflation, but those will catch up, and I just think that's a pretty broad statement to make.
I'm fine with the removal of it, but I want to make one thing very clear. One of the heartburns that I had as far as wind, in terms of how the county was able to tax it, was that typically when we engage with a private enterprise, we sit down at the table and we have negotiations on how we're going to tax, what kind of abatement schedule there's going to be. When it was unclear in Iowa code, the company, Mid-American in particular, lobbied the legislature in order to have a taxing system that takes 0%. In other words, there is no tax in that first year. You know what it is in the second year? 5%, and then 10%. It caps at 30%. No other industry is like that. That's not private enterprise at all. And I think a lot of people across the board, whether you're here from rural Woodbury County or you're here from more of the environmental perspective, think that that's unfair. And so with that, I do think that there's a way that we sort of pick winners and losers, whether it's on taxation or subsidies. But because I believe that the whole of the rest of the resolution speaks for itself, I don't have objection to removing that one line. But I do want it known that that's one of the reasons that Woodbury County, I believe, has pushed back a little bit, because no other company would be able to dictate through the legislature how they're going to be taxed.
Would you like to have it say something simpler like energy that doesn't use subsidies to pick winners and losers?
That would be fine.
I mean, again, I just,
That would be fine, Chairman Ung, with me.
Mr. Bidinger, anything?
No, I'm in agreement with the changes, with the amendments. The only thing I would say is I'm against all subsidies. Kill them all. Now, that's up to the Congress, but if it said that fossil fuels get $1 trillion worldwide, the Inflation Reduction Act just gave $394 billion to renewables in direct pay subsidies. So I'd say kill all subsidies. That's my only comment.
Mr. Raddick, are you still wanting it completely removed, or does that line?
well, I just, again, I don't think there's any way
Right to measure that.
Woodbury County is picking winners or losers here. It's state and federal laws, legislation, they change all the time as far as, heck, just an administration changes what subsidies go where, whose lobbyist buddy is their payroll, and, I mean, we all get how it works. I mean, I think in general, I mean, there's plenty of companies that produce solar. Why, when this administration is there, is so many coming out of China? You know, both parties have their friends that seem to get to take our dollars more than anybody else, it seems. But, you know, we want to be here living our lives, doing the best we can to represent our county. To me, that line doesn't matter. It doesn't change anything in our zoning. So I don't see the point of putting it in there.
Okay.
There's an old saying to not make the perfect the enemy of the good. So with that, I think the rest of the resolution speaks powerfully enough for itself that I'm okay with that line being removed.
Okay. Well, you're just as on record in this public meeting as you would be through a resolution and saying what you said, so.
And also, you know, I do want to say, like, you know, I was looking to maybe see if we could work group something and work this out, but this is, you know, oh, Kim's gone. Alexander, but this is local government. I mean, this is making things open and public and having a discussion, having public input. You know, like I said, at the end of the day, I don't think this really changes anything as far as teeth one way or the other, but it does kind of give a direction that we, you know, we want to protect farm ground in Woodbury County. And that is the goal of our zoning, because zoning for Woodbury County is not in Sioux City, Iowa. Zoning for Woodbury County is not in Sergeant Bluff. Zoning for Woodbury County is in the rural area. And I think it's pretty overwhelming, you know, the comments made from those living in the rural area, not just today, but pretty much over the past 12 months. And I think we're addressing a lot of that without necessarily being offensive. Like I said, I don't want, next era, you know, I don't want you to think we don't want you here in our county. That's not the standpoint that I have in any way, shape, or form. So if that maybe, you know, helps to clarify and take out some of those things that maybe we're pinpointing or, you know, pointing a finger at an industry that's maybe getting subsidized right now, right? But like I say, in 2 years, some different industry could be subsidized. And again, it has no effect whether or not we vote one way or another at the Woodbury County level. So, so I guess, do we need a motion to make those changes?
I think they were friendly amendments, so to speak, and they're on record, so.
Do you have that in the record then, Michelle, there? Or you want an
If you can make a motion for the amendment, and
So I'll-
the
okay.
original motion was as is, so
Sure.
we do need an additional
Okay.
amendment.
So I will make the motion to remove the second line of that. You know which one I'm talking about. It starts with cost effective, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then on the last line, energy industries that steward agricultural land. go all the way down to natural resources, the land of Woodbury County for future generations.
I'll second the amendment, and again, this is just a vote on the amendment. Hearing no other discussion on the amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay.
Aye.
Passes 5-0. We have the motion on the table still for the resolution as amended. Is there any further discussion from other board members? Well, as I've said, I'm less focused and invested in this resolution than I am the actual decisions we've made. I think that speaks louder. And those were community decisions. This room has been just as packed as it is now for several weeks during a period of several months when we discussed the specific proposals and requests and different things that impacted our citizens. And so with that, I just remind everyone, we don't make rules or policy for the state. This is running the way it is intended to, not only in the respect of county government and having everyone an opportunity to speak, but by design. The state has not, for example, instituted statewide setbacks on wind turbines. And there's different population centers around the state. There's different topography. There's different, appetite for different types of energy. And that's simply a reality that we deal with when we look at our 99 perfect rectangles or squares in the state of Iowa as far as counties, and the population centers are different, the topography is different. And so we're not saying no or yes to an entire industry when we make decisions as a community on what fits in Woodbury County. And so with that, again, thank you everyone for showing up and your involvement. Is there any further discussion from the board? Then all those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Thank you. Item 7 from the LAC Authority, Building Services Director Kenny Schmitz for information. This is on the Woodbury County Justice Center and regarding the building services facility.
Kenny Schmitz, Building Services Director. This is an informational item providing the board some additional information on a building for facility, building services, a building facility for building services. The original, and I've got a couple drafts I'll hand out to you here. The first one, is the the original draft we brought to the board to take a look at it. It is a full building facility that would replace building services operation. The second, thank you, Shane. The second draft that was requested would be a scaled down version of such a facility. This scaled down version only includes a garage and a maintenance repair shop. So the first version that we'd brought to the board was approximately 11,868 square feet. Again, that would replace all current operations at the Building Services Eagles Building, including staffing, storage, and all operations. The scaled down version before you tonight is a 2,880 square foot version that would only include a garage area and a maintenance repair shop. The cost of the scaled down facility is approximately $580,000 to $720,000. That's an estimate, since no real design has been done yet. It would incorporate things, probably such as a heated floor in the garage area, and maybe separate heating in the shop area, so the garage area could be kept at a lesser heat, maybe something like 50 to 60 degrees. 50 to 60 degrees. It would be a pre-engineered and/or lumber structured building on slab. So pretty much scaled down in plain Jane. I've got Kevin Rost with Goldberg Group Architects here. He's their senior project architect. And Shane Albrecht with Baker Group. And I'd ask them to come up and answer any questions that you might have.
Kevin Ross, Goldberg Group Architects.
Shane Albrecht, Baker Group.
So, if I may?
Yeah.
My overall question relates to the overall spending of the entire Law Enforcement Center Authority project. And the reason I bring it up is because voters voted on a referendum of $50.3 million not to be exceeded. And so what I want to make sure of, kind of calculating when we get to, originally this was 250,000 is what was the placeholder, is that correct?
That is the current allowance. It's under Houseman's contract.
Okay.
Yes.
And so the reason I'm just a little concerned about it is because as I look at it, the limitation of the entire project is $68,932,000. They cannot be exceeded. And so when we start talking about $315,000 additionally, that makes me nervous in terms of if we exceed that, whether we have violated the bond issue or not. So do we know with some granularity where our total spend is at? Because that would influence whether we said, okay, let's value engineer not having decorative brick or not 12 foot high or a restroom or a heated floor, all those things. So
Right.
that's my question.
So it was my understanding for our last conversation about this project was this would go from a LEC authority project to a county project. So it's kind of two separate pots of money, two separate projects. And so what the intent would be that $250,000 allowance that's currently under Houseman Construction's contract, pulled back into the authority, which then the authority, and I can let Ron with the authority chair speak on that as well too, but then turn that money back to the county so they can use that in conjunction with some CIP funding that was previously allocated to the project to move forward with the project on a lesser scale.
So just to reflect a little bit more on that, Jeremy, it would be somewhat my interpretation that this really isn't an LEC project or part of the LEC project. This would be a county-owned building. The land that this would sit on, if it did sit on it, would have to be done through a 28E agreement with the authority to lease the land that it sits on. But this would be a county-owned and a county-built project. I don't see that this facility or this building would necessarily completely be constructed for the utilization of the LEC, and more that this is a facility that we need to store our equipment in no matter where we use that equipment. Currently, we store the equipment, a good deal of our equipment out at Prairie Hills in one of the sheriff's storage sheds. It's not adequate for what we need, and it's not really ours. They've just allowed us to use the space. Another thing the board might not know is we actually rent a parking space in the parking garage right here next to the courthouse, and we store a skid steer in it in the wintertime. So we do a lot of driving back and forth to Prairie Hills to get mowers, to get skid steers, brushes, or whatever we might need to do our business. But this would allow us to have our own facility to keep that equipment in, to service all of our buildings.
So I want to add one thing, if that's okay, Jeremy, before you comment. This is not, in no way, shape, or form, going to be a change order to the Houseman contract or the Houseman project that is going on right now. This is not going to add to that project at all. The project under the contract, this would be bid out separately
No.
and not be part of that, okay?
I concur with all that. My only question, and if we receive advice that says I'm out to lunch on this, that's fine. But it is a borrow of $315,000. And if I hear your position, that has nothing to do with the law enforcement center bond of $50.3 million. This is a completely separate thing. My question is, if somebody else interprets that and says, no, it's being built at the same time, it's, concurrently, and even though you have a separate loan for it, you can't exceed, no matter how, if we have the assurance from council that that's fine, that's great. But my nervousness is somebody may interpret and say, look, doesn't matter, it's all one project. You can't say, well, this is just so happens to be there. And again, if I'm wrong on that, that's great. That's where it's starting to, have a little, if we were at 65, this wouldn't be an issue, but when we're getting to that threshold, I want to make sure we don't overspend it. That's all I have.
And I can't speak to the legal aspect of it, but when we did the master plan for that 39 acres out there, we had buildings for juvenile courts, detention, treasurer, DHS, all that stuff. So I think this is just another piece of that plan with building services going out there. And this is kind of the first step of potentially additional projects to get building services out there in its entirety. So I guess from my perspective, I don't see this much different than any other building, whether it was for DHS or for treasurer or juvenile that's going on the same campus out there. And I just said I can't speak to the legal aspect of it.
And that would be fine as long as it wasn't over $50.3 million, because we specified that for voters, that we can't go over that.
Right.
And the only reason we're able to right now is $14.2 million in ARPA, $375 from the city, and the value of the interest on the bond. But beyond that,
No.
and I'm not trying to find a problem. I'm just saying we have our limitations, and so when it says 315,000 more, that's where I'm.
And I understand where you're coming from, absolutely. And so, again, this is my perspective. We're taking the $250,000 that was in the contract for the LEC under housing construction. We're removing it from housing construction in that project, turning it back to the county. There's already the additional $315,000 that the county had allocated, to my understanding, Dennis, correct me if I'm wrong, for the CIP project to go towards this. So we're basically taking money out of the LEC project and putting it towards an independent project that the county would then have designed and build.
In my opinion, it wouldn't be any different than the county returning that money and using it somewhere else. In my opinion, this is not associated as an LEC project. It's a standalone project of its own, just like any other, like if we were to build a motor vehicle building out there or something of that nature. The timing of it, actually we don't know because we haven't designed it yet, but the timing of it probably wouldn't take place with the timing of the completion of the LEC. That's an unknown right now.
I do think that the issue that Jeremy raises is something that we'd have to look at, if the board is gonna go further with this. I mean, it's an informational item today, obviously, so no decision is gonna be made. I know that in prior discussions, we haven't had the degree of clarity that we have tonight as far as a strong statement from you that it's solely a county project. As opposed to an authority project. We'd also have to, if it is a county project, we'd have to come up with whatever arrangement needs to be done from the legal standpoint that's acceptable to both the authorities, council, and to our office as far as 2080 agreement or a deed to the land that it sits on, or that sort of thing. So I think that it can be designed, most likely it could be designed in such a way that it's separate, but that's something that we need to think about as we go through this process. Otherwise, if it is part of the LEC project, then the limitation that Jeremy raises is something that the board would have to be mindful of.
If it is a county project, Joshua, do you have any cautions for us specifically in regards to CIP or this 250,000 that would be returned or other sources of funds?
We need to look at that more closely. I mean, like I said, I think tonight we're having the strongest, at least in any meeting that I've been a part of, the strongest statement that no, this is strictly a county project. So then we just need to look harder at that, but I'm not in a position right now, as I sit here, to say yes or no. I guess I want more information.
Who are building services liaisons? Typically chair and one other person, right?
Keith, you are.
Is it me?
Yeah.
Okay. So,
It's Keith and Matthew.
that's what I thought, yeah, okay, I'd kind of prefer maybe Matthew and I and you sit down and maybe put some stuff together. Because I think if we're moving forward with a project like this while the LEC is not complete yet, it kind of feels like it's part of the same project. So even though it's two different taxing bodies, right? The LEC authority on one body, the county on another, it serves that, it's part of that, it's being built at the same time. So I'd like to set up some kind of planning
I'm all for
between.
more meetings.
Yeah, I know.
I think the primary thing is seeing how, if it is a lease or if it's a deed to the land or something to make it clean, where it's, because if it is a county building in that area, then it would be able to service other needs. If there's a need to bring a vehicle into the shop that has nothing to do with the LEC, you could do that, And that's, I think, what the expansion potential here is what we're aiming for, not necessarily guarantee that every square footage and watt of energy is going to be dedicated to the LEC, but just that you need a presence closer in that area for that and any other county interests.
All right, and I don't know, Ron may be able to speak to this, but I believe that, and or Shane, but I believe they've talked to the authority's attorney about a possible 28E or a lease agreement to do something like this.
We had, and Dennis was present then too, we did have a conversation with Jason Kaminsky about, a little bit about this, but to what Joshua brought up earlier, we weren't clear with the path. He had questions about how everything was gonna be doing and different practices. The one thing he did tell us, if we're doing more than something, if there's something other than this just functioning for the LEC, it does not work under the, now that could be rewritten, but it didn't work under the way the authority's current lease and articles were set up. That wasn't, they couldn't do more than this. That was something that he cautioned us on.
And that's the same issue I raised the last time that you guys were here with this board as well. So I think we're on the same page as far as that goes.
Right, and that's why you saw the stronger opinion come back this evening saying this would be a county facility.
As far as exactly what that would look like from the legal standpoint, I mean, our office does need to be a part of those discussions because our office does need to be a part of those discussions because I haven't had any more information on it than the last time that you guys were here in the public meeting, which you need direction from the board as well. But ultimately, the board's attorney needs to be agreement with, and our office needs to feel comfortable with whatever the situation is for that building out there.
Can I ask one other question? What, do we still have contingency, or does the authority rather, far be it from me, does the authority still have a contingency? And has that contingency been expended above 60, 70%? Or are there still dollars in that contingency that are available?
There's still dollars in that contingency that are available.
Do you know roughly, without getting into the answer, and
I'm sorry, I don't know
No,
well enough to even.
and the only reason
It's
I'm bringing it
also
up
something I
is.
don't want
it-
to say publicly.
Yeah, and the only reason I'm bringing, I get you. The only reason I'm bringing it up is that may be an opportunity within there if that's not going to be expended. And I'm not trying to find something to be difficult on. I just want to make sure that we have that margin of breathing room that nobody can say, look, even though you're borrowing it on a separate note, at
Right.
the end of the day, your borrow was this.
Right,
That's
and
the only,
Sorry.
yeah, no, go ahead.
But I think the issue, but I think the issue was that if it was under their authority, it was stipulated to be up to a certain amount. Is that right?
Right, I just don't know from our legal counsel if it's just because you're doing it separately, but its real function is on the same property and in support of that, that you can say, well, that's not really a project, you know, that's completely separate. I don't know if that passes the smell test. If it does, that's fine, but that's just something that I want to make sure it does, so we don't find out otherwise.
Sure.
And again, yeah, we need more particulars, so, I mean, we're not gonna have an answer on that tonight.
Well, this is information on here. So we
Correct,
are
yeah,
not
this
voting
just-
on anything.
Based on our last conversation with the board, we were given kind of some direction to head towards to look at, and that's what we're bringing back to you tonight, just for information, and have further discussion on what some possibilities are to fund a project for the building services out there, so.
I mean, and that's kind of why I think it'd be good for Matthew and I and Kenny to meet and discuss this as a standalone project, kind of following the, process you would follow if you're doing a standalone project here. So that's what I would like to do.
Okay, so I have one question left, if I'm allowed to ask a question. What's the next steps that you want from us? I know Joshua needs time to review. The reason I say that is, at the end of the day, the LEC is gonna open, okay? Kenny's gonna have mowers, skid loaders, different things, different pieces of equipment. This building right now won't finish before the LEC's done, okay? So he's gonna be traveling those things across. So just out of respect, what's our next step that you need from us so that we could take this? Because one of the things that we're gonna have to do, and I'm speaking now as, when I say we, it's actually gonna be the authority, but what the authority's gonna have to do is they're going to have to remove that allowance from Houseman's contract. But just to move this along, what's the next steps you want from us?
I think, in the process though, typically when we have a project started, it's started from the board's perspective, not from consultants on a different project, if you know what I'm saying. Like,
Sure.
So technically, I guess you don't have a next step for you guys, but, from maybe Ron's perspective as, the chair of the authority, yeah, he's probably gonna want a maintenance facility out there. Kenny, as maintenance director, probably wants a maintenance facility out there. I can see the sheriff's department wanting their building to have a maintenance facility out there. And I think it behooves the taxpayers to have a maintenance facility out there rather than us sending guys all over town with trailers moving stuff back and forth from either the training center or downtown here and out to there. So I think we need to start the project from the county's perspective and move forward from there.
On the question of where to start from the county's perspective, the draft plans in front of us, I don't think the board, I'm not sure if there's any changes we would necessarily make to this as far as the layout. It seems very basic and fundamental to me. So just as you're here, are there any questions from board members on why you came to this layout, so that when Mr. Raddick and I meet with Kenny and we bring in Joshua, we know where the board is at?
I guess the way we came out with this layout is where we had the original design, then we were asked to scale it down. When we did the scale down, we took it down to what we felt was a bare bones minimum. That is the bare bones minimum that we felt that that building services needed.
And if you look at the master plan that you have in front of you, which is the whole building, it still has those same pieces that can be added onto, and it's built in a way. You can add the storage to the back of the building, and you can still add the offices.
Can you speak to the kind of equipment that's gonna be out there?
I'm
Like
sorry,
with the
Jeremy?
12-foot high doors, could you speak to the kind of equipment that's gonna be housed out there?
Yeah,
that
so.
Requires that overhead?
Yeah, so normally when we move skid steers around, it's on a trailer.
Okay.
So trailer and a truck. Equipment that we would store in there, we have 2 skid steers, snow brushes. We'll probably have 3 large lawn mowers. So all that stuff, all that equipment that we move around on trailers and things like that. We did talk about, Kevin, did you want
Go
to say
ahead,
something?
sorry.
We did talk about what size or what height those doors might be.
And that's what I was going to get into as well too. There's a lot of detail like that that hasn't been fine tuned. You know, kind of start off with some ideas to put some of these things on concept, looking big picture. Said nobody's under contract to do a full design on that, so there's still a lot of tweaks and stuff that have to be vetted out to pin down. Is it a 12-foot door? Is it a 10-foot door? Type thing. So just kind of keep that in mind with the plans as well.
So if you were talking next steps and Kenny was going to do some kind of a project for the county, my next steps would be to first work with the legal department on a contract, but it would be a design contract to get that design and to find out what those actual numbers are. This is a generalized design.
And I was gonna have one other reason to go with a 12-foot door. If you look at the size of the parking lot the LEC has and the amount of snow that's gonna have to be removed out there, right now he may use a skid steer, but later on he may figure out he needs a payloader with a box blade on it for snow removal of a parking lot of that size. That 12-foot door allows for a payloader to be able to come into that shop.
Yeah, skid steers aren't going to do that facility.
Shane, you had asked as far as the next steps, moving the ball downfield. To me, knowing the overall spend or obligation to spend, I think is critical. I mean, if you say, hey, we've got $1 million, we're not, and we're south of that, this isn't really even a conversation, because we've got, you're talking about 580, 720, well, we're safely within that. If you say, well, we're probably at that right now, so that number I think is critical, and then obviously our legal counsel saying, you don't have to count that toward this. And if that's not the case, then that's the game changer, and it's a whole nother thing. But those two things, without those, it's hard to know.
I forgot something, and I'm just gonna bring this up. When you're talking about numbers, Dennis, you can help with this. Right now, there's already 941 that's in that $68 million number that you have. There's $941,000 that's in that number. That was originally part of the overall thing, because remember when they switched the CIP? When they switched from ARPA funds for the furniture, fixtures, and equipment, that furniture, fixtures, and equipment was originally in that $68 million number you're listing there. And that money is still there to do whatever happens to come back. But that money is not being spent on furniture, fixtures, and equipment. That's a whole different ARPA number and a whole different thing. So that's $941,000 that we've talked about many times.
And remind me where the 941 is coming from. What's the source of funds?
That's our standard deduction. So if that is returned, you can use that anywhere.
But that is part of our overall ARPA cost.
Yes, 10 million.
But it's of the
Of the
14.2.
yes. That is
I'm
correct.
including the 14.2 and the 68.932 as our limitation.
Yeah, well, you have, that numbers already can tell you, there's 941 that's not allocated toward anything at the LEC. $941,000, that would be able to be used on this building if that's what you chose, and still be underneath that number.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, I forgot that.
No, that's
but
fine. And as long as we don't exceed that 68.932, that's fine, no matter what this number is. I just want to, that's the only thing that
Yeah, so with that
cautious about.
941 cushion and what we're showing you for probable costs of this building, you would not exceed that number.
And you're saying everything, because you guys are keeping the running total, everything wouldn't exceed that 68.932?
And if it was an authority building, as long as we don't use, for instance, CIP funds from the county side, and you're using something like that or the general allotment from ARPA, then that's a question of which makes more sense in the long term. You know, is this building going to eventually serve other facilities, or is it so dedicated and it's so much of a, you know, issue to change land over and things like that, that it should remain? But there is a $250,000 figure mentioned somewhere. It's in the lease, right?
That's part of what's under Houseman's contract.
That's the contract, okay.
It's not in the lease.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
So that's the only limitation.
It was in the bid documents as an allowance.
Oh. And we're past that because we're not, the timeline is not allowing the
Correct.
completion at this time, okay.
The initial thought process of that $250,000 when it was initially part of that bid contract was to add something similar to this onto the building. It was never defined, it was never drawn, never thought about, other than a dollar allotment was
Right.
set there.
Right.
It says for a building to be designed at a later date. That's,
Okay.
Correct.
All right.
So is everyone clear on next steps?
Not 100%.
I was told there is none because Keith and Matthew are going to meet, and I have no next steps. The next steps are all for people other than me.
What are you doing Thursday?
I'll check my schedule.
I don't know what, I don't know if he's open Thursday. It's probably more important that the chair.
It's probably most important that
Why don't
the
we all
attorney's
discuss it
office
at
is
the end of
there.
the meeting?
What's that?
Why don't we all three just discuss it at the end of the meeting?
Sounds good.
All right,
Thank you, guys.
thank you.
Thank you. You need these back?
For Michelle, these are the same documents that are actually in the backup material? Yeah. Here's the larger document.
All right, moving on. Item 8, reports on committee meetings. I had WCICC. We had the annual evaluation of the chief. Went very well. I think the commission's been just as happy with his performance as the board has, and our departments are very happy as well. So appreciate Building Services for helping up in their issue they had up there in their space in IT. That's been fixed and found. Anything else from you gentlemen?
The only thing I have is with SHIP, they're having an early childhood forum August 7th at the Sioux City Museum from 10 to 11:30 a.m. They're going to be different elected officials from around the state and Northwest Iowa, just explaining the early childhood programs for Iowa and needs, concerns, and funding, and what we're going to do here in Woodbury to make sure the kids are taken care of. So anyhow, it's an open, so you can register for that. It's free. But August 7th, 10 to 11:30 a.m. at Sioux City Museum. So that's all I have.
Anything, Mr. Nelson?
I had a STARCOM meeting Wednesday, this past Wednesday, but I don't have anything to report back from that. So that's all I got.
All right, item 9 is citizen concerns. This is for anything not already addressed on the agenda. Are there any citizen concerns?
Hello, it's me again. I was wondering, on the county level, do you guys honor tribal court orders and like in regards to emergency guardianships? Because I've had a few incidences happen in regards to Native families that live here. Parents may be suffering like substance abuse, and then grandma or somebody from the Omaha reservation or like Winnebago, they want to get emergency guardianship of the kids so they can take take them. But I've talked to Rex about it, and, you know, he said something about Iowa code, like, the county looks at tribal nations as like another state. So, and I know that the police department itself doesn't really get involved with family matters, but there was an incident that happened where a young lady was sexually assaulted. It was one of the daughters, and then one of the other daughters was like kind of missing, went off with a neighbor somewhere. So the grandma basically got emergency guardianship from, the Omaha Nation, but when we come here to, present that legal document, it's not anything that the Sioux City Police Department takes action on. So I'm wondering if that's something that I need to have a conversation with you folks, or if this is something entirely not in your realm, like who would I talk to in regards to that? Because it does happen a lot. So, yeah.
Well, I would say most of the custody issues that I know of, even if you're not in a tribe, the police department does not interfere or intervene in any way, shape, or form. I've experienced this a lot lately with my grandson. So,
yes,
I guess that would maybe be an attorney's office or sheriff's department. I don't know.
Yes.
Well, it sounds.
We would rely on what the county attorney's office.
Right, yeah. And I mean, it sounds like the
Called
main
you.
issue is possibly with the Sioux City Police Department, so and maybe you've already had that conversation, but I would say they'd probably be your main point of contact. Typically, in the analogy to family court and family law, if there's non-compliance with an order of that court, then the remedy is to go back to that court and ask, one of the party asks that another party be held in contempt for not following the order. But it's not something that a law enforcement officer on scene can adjudicate, okay, yes.
Enforce.
They're in violation of the court order, and to even know what action to take, that would just put the law enforcement officer in a position that they're not able to make that call. So that's why they go back to the original family law court. So I think it would be similar to that situation.
I think the biggest frustration is that it's tribal court, and so a lot of our tribal members live here in the urban area. So like when you cross jurisdictions, it makes it very challenging. And I guess in this particular incident, the older daughter was sexually assaulted. That was actually a case that has a case number here in Woodbury County, but grandma is still, we don't know what happened to that 7-year-old, so we don't know if that 7-year-old is also being sexually abused too as well. So, so that's basically what, I don't know if there's a larger discussion that needs to happen, maybe on a statewide level, or, it's just something that keeps happening. And I've had different Native families reach out to me about it, and we just keep running into that. So we want to obviously keep our Native communities protected against anything like that. So, but maybe I'll reach out to you and have a deeper conversation about that. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other citizen concerns?
You guys want copies?
I'd move to receive.
Motion by Taylor, second by Bittinger. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Passes 5-0. Name and address and.
My name's Jeff Kroll. I live at 1569 Benton Avenue. And as you're aware, the DOT has a big building project going out just south of where I live. Our road, Benton Avenue, runs from 155th towards Highway 20, curves around, and becomes 158th Street. So we're dealing with two roads here. The reason there's 10 of us residents out there And the reason we bought and built out there was because it's a gravel road. It's a dead end. Nobody comes down this road except the people that live there. When the DOT asked for if there was any objection to this building project, we came to that meeting and we didn't object. You know, progress, go for it. All right, we understand. But our concern was what they were going to use 158th and Benton Avenue for. And they said that's a rear entrance to our property. We have no intention of using it. It would be an emergency only. Well, today, we've got side dump semis, gravel trucks, cement trucks, and every contractor working on that project coming down our road and into the back entrance. Why? Because Highway 20's tore up and they have to wait 30 to 45 seconds longer to get into the DOT property. So they decide to go around and come down our road. Now, it's a county road. I can't stop them from doing that. But I went and met with Jessica Felix, and I expressed our concerns, and I made a couple suggestions about where they could go from Buchanan, make a frontage road into their property. It would be 1/3 of the cost of what they want to do to Benton Avenue. And she said, no, that's not going to happen. And she said, we're going to pave Benton Avenue. We're going to put a temporary concrete road of 9 inches thick, which is not temporary. And so that you'll have a brand new paved road. Well, we don't want a paved road. The reason we're out there is because, you know, children ride their bikes down the gravel road and they shoot rabbits in the ditch with their, you know, Spider-Man bow and arrow set. And people ride horses and enjoy the rural area that we live in. Now we've got all the contractors and DOT trucks using that back entrance, and it's a nightmare of traffic. And there's no reason, absolutely no reason to be using that road except they don't want to wait an extra minute to access through Highway 20. Now, I know you don't dictate to the DOT what they can and cannot do. What ticks me off is that they can do whatever they darn well please, and the heck with you residents. And Jessica's attitude that day was, you know, I said, a real easy, she said, the reason we're paving it is because the Siouxland Regional Transit System is going to use that road to access their garages that we're leasing to them out there. So the SRTS is going to have, I don't know how many buses up and down our road daily and change again, the whole atmosphere of our environment there. To say it's temporary is just ridiculous. When we came to this meeting and they asked if we had an objection and they said it was only going to be an emergency use, clearly they lied. And Jessica said, well, I wasn't around then, so I don't know what happened. Well, she still represents the DOT. And I suggested that the SRTS, she said, we can't do that because of the Highway 20 construction. And I said, well, SRTS can stay exactly where they are until 20's finished. That's all. They don't have to pave. They don't have to do anything with our road. We could even put up a speed limit sign of 25 miles an hour or something to kind of protect our children and our grandchildren from the contractors that are flying down this road. But she said, well, that's not we're not going to do that either because we have a lease with them.
So Jeff, can I interrupt you a second?
Yes.
I'm not from the DOT, so I can't speak on their behalf.
But you are from SRTS.
I am the chair of CERTS, yes.
Okay.
Chair of sorts or?
Chair
Sorts,
of
of
CERTS.
sorts,
And I'm
yeah.
also on the board at Simcoe. So the two organizations
Yeah.
that are leasing from the IDOT, and we absolutely need access.
Not on Benton, though, in 158.
Yeah, Benton and
do you?
158, because they are gonna close the north lanes of Highway 20.
Right.
And they're also doing quite a bit of construction on the DOT building and the DOT site and, south lanes at this point. The CERTS building and Simcoe building currently is already sold, and they have to be out by a certain date. And actually, it's within like a month or so, or two, I don't even remember what the date is. So they're already moving into getting new furniture in the new place and everything. It's not something we can stop. Those are all agreements that are legal and signed. And I can assure you that there's no way in the future that they plan to use this road as the entrance because it's just less convenient. So in the future, when Highway 20 is regraded and open, they fully intend to use the easier access point to get in and out.
Well, they fully intended, the DOT fully intended not to use our road except in emergency situations.
Well, and
So why would I believe anyone who says?
I would
and
say
I
during the
do it
construction-
respectfully, why would I believe anyone who says we have no intention of using it? We're gonna pour 9 inches of concrete and make this a super highway, but we're not gonna use it. She said we're gonna put a gate and a fence so no one will have access to that property from the rear entrance. I don't believe them. I'm sorry, I don't believe them. I shouldn't have believed them the first time.
Well, I would just say that, I mean, the same way that you probably didn't drive around 10 blocks to come here, you just came straight here, right? I mean,
Right.
it's a common sense thing. Once the road's open, you're gonna take the easiest route to get to.
The road's open now. 20's
But-
open, it's not closed. Why aren't
Right.
they using that?
If you're using heavy equipment though and things, it's, safer to be out of the way of, the most
Yeah,
traffic, right? I
DOT
mean,
pickup trucks are not heavy equipment. Contractors and their pickup trucks are not heavy equipment.
well, I'm just saying,
And I don't
from my
mind during the
perspective for
construction,
certs,
I don't mind us during the construction. Like I said, I'm all for progress, I'm all for their project. I don't mind that they're using our road as long as they treat it carefully like our children are playing there type of thing, okay. But to pave it and say it's not gonna be used in the future, I don't believe that.
Sure.
And who do I come to after we find out that you're gonna use it daily and not Highway 20?
well, I'd
Even
probably-
then, it's gonna be easier to get on Benton than it is to use Highway 20.
I probably won't be on certs at that point, but
Oh, okay.
I can tell you that, and you can talk to the transit director, out at certs too, if you have any, doubts on that. He's a good man. Well, Kurt Miller is kind of currently the transit director, and then Brian Pearson is going to be stepping into his role as he retires. So he'll be very open and honest with you. He's a former military guy. He's a serious guy that doesn't BS you. So yeah, I would take any concerns to him too. But like I said, I just don't see why, if I'm a bus driver, when I'm driving in from, say Holstein, why I wouldn't just come right on Highway 20 and turn right.
That's right.
As opposed to turning right,
Why aren't
going up.
why aren't they doing it now?
Well,
They're not.
they could be coming from a different direction and then avoiding the construction of Highway 20 altogether. So I don't know
They
who you're
come
speaking
down,
of
they come
now.
from the west, going east, they turn around at Buchanan, come back to the DRT, or DOT's driveway and pull in. It takes 30, 40 seconds longer than turning where they're not allowed to turn right now.
And these are the DOT trucks, correct?
It's everybody, yeah. Semis and everybody. And some of them are the cement trucks and gravel trucks and semis delivering furniture and equipment or
When you
using
drive by
Benton.
on Highway 20, isn't the access cut off right now?
What's that?
The access on Highway 20 is cut off right now, though.
You
That's
can
all.
turn in there coming from the east to the west. You can turn right into DOT. And coming from the west to the east, going towards Lawton, you have to go down to Buchanan Avenue, make a U-turn, and I've seen cement trucks and semis all do it, and come back to the driveway of the DOT and turn in. It takes a few seconds longer, and, there's a traffic jam, yeah. but I've never waited over a minute to go from Buchanan to the DOT entrance, never. And it's just, oh, there's a back way? Okay, let's use that.
My guess is then maybe the DOT has some kind of policy right now on the construction site that they're trying to get as much traffic off of Highway 20 as possible
Yeah,
because
I
of
don't
the
know.
construction. So
I asked her, I said, okay, would you at least send a note to the contractors and your employees to try and use Highway 20 instead of Benton and 158? She goes, no, I'm not gonna do that.
And like I said, I can't speak for the DOT. I'm not.
I can speak for our conversation.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, can we put up a sign that says children at play, speed limit 25 miles an hour? And she goes, no, it's a county road and we're allowed to go 55, so that's not gonna happen.
What,
I said,
Mark,
what's
is
gonna
the,
happen when a child is run over by a cement truck there? I know what's gonna happen. Your face is gonna be all over the news because I'm gonna tell them that you did refuse to do any or take any action. And I don't know what the county can do about it. I know you guys don't tell the DOT what to do, right? Nobody tells the DOT what to do. They're in charge of trucking and airlines and space travel and what do they care about
Well,
Woodbury
we're not
County?
concerned with space travel, or as you said, I mean, this is a conversation you
I'm
can continue.
concerned about my kids and grandkids.
Yes, we
I guess
understand the concern.
we could ask the county engineer on anything regarding speed limits in the county and how that's all set.
I don't know why we can't put a cautionary
If you wanna
sign of some
come up to the
sort.
microphone.
We don't put children at play signs anywhere on our system. They're ineffective. They're not addressing a continuous hazard. It's in our county signing policy. We don't place children at play signs. We can do a speed limit. It first requires we do a speed study out there. And we have our signs currently on Barker. We can move them out there about the middle of next week and do that study. And then we base our speed limit upon what we find with that study. We also look at the geometrics of the road, the curve geometrics. I think that's less than a 35-mile-an-hour curve. So,
I wouldn't take it at more than 35.
well, I wouldn't
You'll be
either.
off the top head.
I'm familiar with your road. I
Yeah.
drive it often enough to be just checking on it. We've been doing
Going to the
working.
DOT?
No, I work with Grady Marks was experimenting with a new
Yeah.
dust control
Yeah.
product that we're considering for use on all of our roads. So
Yeah.
we do things in cooperation with our applicator, but we can do that study out there and then make a recommendation to the board as to the reasonable speed limit.
That's not hard
But
to
as
do.
far
is-
as cautionary signs, again, they are specifically not in our program. They are no longer in the MUTCD. If you don't have a park or a playground, those are the signs that are available under the MUTCD, where you have a continuous presence of children. In this case,
I think we get it,
Yeah,
Mark.
that's not hard to do the speed study, correct?
pardon me?
It's not hard to do the speed study. You can
All I
put
have to do
some,
is write a resolution for board consideration and approval.
okay,
But
so,
that's after we do the
That
study.
would be a big help.
right. I think you've raised the issue publicly, which we appreciate. I think we're just as interested in what we can versus what we can't
We'll-
do. So this is something that I
We'll
think
get a
one of our
study
county
done
staff can
as
do.
soon as we can pull our signs from
Thank
where
you.
they're currently working, so.
I think you made the point there too, what we can do as Woodbury County. So this is a step we can take for you.
And you think SRTS will meet with me in terms of the future concerns and use
Yeah,
of that road?
if you give Brian a call, I'm sure he'd be
Okay.
willing to meet with you, or Kurt Miller, like I said, he's
Okay.
the outgoing director. Brian's probably gonna be more on hand, because
Okay. All right,
Kurt's really
thank you.
dealing with the construction, so.
Any other citizen concerns?
It's not really a concern. Again, Tom Trahern, Next Area Energy. My
Compliments,
address-
citizen compliments, then? It's not a concern?
So I just wanted to thank the board for allowing time to speak on the ordinance earlier this evening, and also the consideration of the solar ordinance. I know that's went through Planning and Zoning Commission, and I've been working with Planning Department, and I know that public hearing is what's set for, I think, 2 weeks from today, and I hope to be here to address the board at that time, and just appreciate the openness to taking a look at that ordinance and and working through the process on it. So appreciate it. Thank you. I'm gonna leave my card if any of you want. I'll just set it here.
Thank you.
Keith, that was Brian who?
Let me just see if I can get you his number.
Good evening. Just wanted to clarify, last week when I had the check from the ACH pool, Dennis called me shortly after the meeting to clarify the numbers. The 3 previous years were 50,000 returned in '22, 30,000 '21, and 30,000 in 2020. So that's 110,000, and last year's total was 121. So we're 231,000 over the last 4 years of returned money in that pool money. So we were off. Dennis asked if I would just bring it to your attention, so we have it, and there we go.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other citizen concerns? Going once. Yes, please come forward.
I'm at 1556 Benton Avenue, and I'm with Mark.
And your name?
Judy Navarrete.
Thank you.
We're, live out there, and so I guess the main concern is why do they need to pave it? They're driving up and down the road now, correct? So they're doing just fine, so why do they need to pave it? Why do you spend millions of dollars to pave something that doesn't need to be, and it's gonna be temporary used, pure and simple?
Well, these have all been publicly raised questions and
Yep.
appreciate that. It's the same concern. We'll make sure it gets directed to the right
Yep,
place.
because I just think that's, like he said, we live in a very nice area, and I understand you're trying to build something, I get it. But the thing is that if you're only gonna use something temporary, why are you ruining something that's good now? You use it, be done with it, be on with yourself, and leave the road as it is. Pure and simple.
Thank you.
So, that's my concern. So,
Again, I'm not
Sometimes-
speaking for the DOT, but I do think they have a policy typically whenever they declare a detour route for any reason, they do tend to pave or improve the road.
what if the road doesn't need to be improved? It's doing
Well,
good
that's-
as it is.
I think something you'd have to bring up with the DOT again, but
Okay.
I'm just speaking to like how they typically do things in a project.
I guess I need some clarification. The residents out there would prefer that road not be paved?
Yeah.
Yeah.
On this list, I've got 8 out of 10 signed it saying they'd rather not have it be paved.
I also gotta say, this is a first. We've never
Yeah,
actually
we've
had
never
some.
had that before. Especially when the paving isn't costing county taxpayers. The board has,
Maybe we don't wanna use their money.
the board has not signed the agreement yet on paving of 158th and Benton. The DOT has submitted plans that I've reviewed. From a geometric perspective and a road improvement perspective, they fully meet our standards. The question is whether or not the board wants to proceed with allowing the DOT to pave it. That is your choice. To me, having a dust-free road permanently after this project is done would be preferable to having a gravel road out there, but.
Well, I gotta say.
Nothing's going to come of arguing the merits before this board.
Yeah.
Because,
Well, no, you don't have to pave that road, Matthew.
yeah,
That's the point I'm trying to make. The DOT is preparing an agreement to come to us, and what they're looking at doing is paving that road so it can be used for temporary detour purposes. Right now, the left turn movement can't be done into the DOT complex. CERTS is going to have difficulty when that westbound construction, the lanes currently open, are closed, which is why they want to go to the paved road to get those buses in and out of the facility. Once the 2-year project is over to improve Highway 20, we're left with a road that's easier for our department to maintain because we don't run a motor grader over there except to take care of this road. It would be then a paved road stub that instead of having a neighbor whose goodwill puts dust control down on the road every year, it would be a road that would be dust-free without that application. So I guess that's something that they should present to the board if they prefer not to have it paved, and then that's a consideration you'd have to make.
Mr. Taylor?
When you say they, you're talking about the residents of that area?
Yes.
So obviously, this is not for consideration tonight nor action, but I would invite you to ask others, because I've been the recipient at times of making a decision and not hearing from everybody on all sides. So that would be something that I would want to have full input on.
Yeah, we get so many requests for pavement that we can't achieve, and here's one that DOT is laying it at our feet at no cost to the county, so.
And I gotta say, from our perspective, if we're not gonna take free pavement, why are we gonna keep spending money on dust control then?
We're not spending money on dust control on that one.
No.
Grady Marks currently does that one at no cost to the
Sure.
county.
Yeah.
We would not put dust control on that road. It doesn't meet our
Okay, it doesn't meet
traffic
that, yeah,
requirements
that's
for
correct.
dust control. Grady does that. He lives at the end of the road. He does that free of charge for his neighbors, just because he wants a dust-free road.
You guys gotta get him a
And,
Christmas card every
but,
year.
you know, Grady isn't gonna be there forever either.
Oh, we pay for it, it's just not in money.
I just, I gotta say, it is a first. I've never had somebody say they don't want their road paved.
That's why
especially-
that's why I wanted clarification, because we're within a week or two of bringing that agreement to the board for consideration.
I mean, how long is the north lane's gonna take here? Are you talking like, that's another 9 months after something, so you're talking this is gonna be
It's
a
2
year and a
seasons
half?
for this project.
2 years. You want 2 years of trucks going by your place on gravel roads, you're gonna have a lot of dust. I'm just saying, I'd take the free pavement, have a clean car. I mean,
We like riding the horses up and down there, we like.
we'll give you a gravel shoulder,
We've been
right?
eating dust for 15 years. We've been there for 15 years.
All right, everyone talk to Mark about what you want the county to do, because he's a county employee.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other citizen concerns? Any board concerns? Final item, number 10.
Hey,
Nothing.
Jeff.
Any board concerns? Hearing none.